Page 43, Largo. On page 41, they give you some name the treble clef notes and all that. You can do that. In my opinion, by now, you should know all of those notes instantly, the names of them. If you don't, please go back and go through this book again and drill yourself on the names of the notes. You should instantly know them. You shouldn't need to count up or count down or use any crutches or anything. They should be memorized. I mean, I know, but that's just the way I teach. It's just learn them. Drill yourself over and over until you know them. On page 42, they're introducing you to a dotted quarter note, which means now we have a dotted rhythm. Dotted rhythms tend to cause a lot of people a lot of problems, and I've never understood it because they're actually pretty simple. Now, I'm not giving a separate lesson on page 42. I'm just going to combine all that into here. At the bottom of the page, they give you two very common melodies that are well known throughout a lot of countries around, because these melodies use dotted rhythms. And if you can hear the melody and how the dotted rhythm fits, maybe that will help you understand dotted rhythms. I don't really agree to that approach, but that's what they're doing. A dotted quarter note, and it doesn't matter what the notes are, dotted rhythms always work the same way. If you understand how they work, you could figure out any dotted rhythm. Dotted quarter notes, what they're doing, so okay, let's do that. A quarter note is going to get so many counts. So far in this book, it's always gotten one count, so we'll stick with that. It gets one count. The dot gets half the value of whatever the note is. Any note can be dotted. So here, if a quarter note gets one count, then the dot is going to get a half a count. It's like an eighth note gets half a count. You simply tie them together. You put the note and the dot together, and it's the full length of the whole thing. So a dotted quarter note is the same as a quarter note and an eighth note tied together. That's all. Then whatever follows it comes on, after the end of whatever. Usually it's an eighth note. Doesn't have to be, but it could be. So look at America down here. Second measure. 1 and 2 and. So the E is on 1. The dot is on 2 because the quarter note gets count. So something comes on beat 2. In this case, it's the dot. That means that whatever comes after that is on the and of 2. 2 and. 1 and 2 and 3. And that gives you your long short. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. And angels we have heard on high. 1 and 2. And you can see then in the two hands how they line up. The notes line up. Look at the second measure. You have notes here on beat 1. And then on beat 2. And the dot comes on beat 2. And then in between, before beat 3, you get an F. And then on beat 3, it's the half note. So it's 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and. 1 and 2 and 3 and. That's how that works. Last measure, same thing. 1 and 2. So that. That's all they're doing on page 42. I want to talk about page 43. We got dotted rhythms here. And again, you can tell by the left hand and these steady quarter notes how the notes line up and when they're played in relation to each other. So in the first measure, you have this E and you have a C chord. They're together. The dot comes on beat 2. And then you have an eighth note and then beat 3. So it's 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And that's as complicated as dots get. Well, more or less. Again, just remember any note can be dotted, but if you just remember the rule for dots, the dot gets half of the value of the note, you can figure it out. Another way of looking at it that helps some people is consider the dotted note as 3 of whatever the note is under it. I've told you before on a dotted half note, see, we've had dotted notes all along, you know. That is the same as 3/4 notes, because 2/4 notes to a half note, well, 3/4 notes to a dotted half note. They all work the same way. Quarter note, there's 2/8 notes to a quarter note. Well, there's 3/8 notes to a dotted quarter note. So you can also, in some cases, it helps to think of it as 3/8 notes. Depends on the music and what's going on. So I could think of that as 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 8th notes. 1, 2, 3. It's the same thing. Whichever way you look at it. One time you may think of it one way and another time another way, depending on the music. You have to be, the more you know about how to figure these things out, the better off you'll be, because sometimes the music isn't really clear on it. Now, let's look at this Largo a little more closely. 4/4 time, 4 counts in a measure, quarter note gets a count. We're in the key of C. We're starting in C position, but we are going to move around. So let's just take it one hand at a time. Make sure I've already done the right hand. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Okay. Third line. Now you're ending the second line here. Third line is here. You got to move. Well, we're going to lift up between the phrases anyway, right? You lift up. Well, sometimes you lift up and move at the same time. You don't just lift, you lift and move somewhere. That's what we're doing here. You end the second line. As you lift up, rather than staying there, you move. Here, that's fine. It's like taking a breath. Know where you're at, know where you want to be, and which finger's involved. That finger. So I'm going to go from here to here. Lift up. If you have to, you practice the hand moves. We do sometimes. So the third line, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you're going to stay in this position then until the bottom. And when you go back to the top, which I'll explain in a minute, you're going to move back down, but you have a rest there at the bottom. Then during the rest, you simply move down. Left hand has these chords here. The C chord, 1, 2. Try and listen carefully and get the notes down at the same time if you can. Just lower the whole hand down gently. Let the wrist collapse each time. Don't play with a stiff wrist. You got to relax here. Don't get tight. Third measure, it's an F and a G. All quarter notes, so the rhythm shouldn't be a problem. Third line, the left hand isn't moving around. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So put the hands together here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Let's go down to the second line, last measure. Going into the third line. You're here. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. As we lift up, you're simply going to move the right hand. 4 and. 4 and. 3 and 4 and. So forth. Last line. Last 2 measures. You're here. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3. Rest. You see, you have a dotted half note. Same as 3/4 notes. It gives 3 count. Well, on the left hand, you have to play a note. 1, 2, 3, rest. This is a fairly slow piece, and I would encourage you to go look, Google, or search on YouTube for New World Symphony. It's the name of the symphony that's beautiful. Listen to the whole symphony. This melody is from the second movement, but listen to the whole thing. It's really pretty. Now, we have this DC fine they talk about at the top. Italian again. Da capo, or I just say DC because I'm lazy, means go back to the beginning. You know, that's just across the board. You can count on it. Go back to the beginning. You know, don't pass go, don't collect $200. You go to the beginning. That's it. And at the bottom of the page, you see the DC fine above the staves. So it's like a repeat sign, except it's more reliable than a repeat sign, because in a repeat sign, you don't always go back to the beginning. But in DC, you go back to the beginning. All fine means go to fine. It's fine, not fine. And the fine is into the second line. You see the thin and thick bar lines? Remember, that's the symbol for the end of a piece. So what happens is you're going to play all 4 lines, and you go back and play the first 2 lines again, is what that really means. I call it the road map. When do we go where? And that's one of the things we have to look at when we're looking over music now. So at the end, you're here. During the rest, you're going to move the right hand down because you got to go back to the beginning. And the beat's got to be a steady beat. You don't mess up the beat for any of this. It's got to be steady. Dynamic-wise, it starts out soft, and that's the melody. So you decide what soft is. You keep this left hand way in the background, very soft. Because it's easy to overpower one note when you're playing 3 down here. Keep it way super soft in the left hand. You got that swell up in the last 2 measures. You're going to get a little louder, so you go up to moderately soft and back down. To here. And left hand, just keep it in the background. And at the end of the second line, you go down to very soft. Soft, soft, very soft. Don't get very soft until the whole note, so take your time. In the left hand, you can hardly hear it. You get to the third line, you go up to moderately loud. That's the melody. The left hand is still soft. And then the last line, you go down to moderately soft. In the right hand, the left hand is still very soft. Moderately soft is a little louder than soft, but not much. And then when you do the DC and go back, now you're soft again. It takes time to get the control to be able to play softly. Don't use the soft pedal, that's cheating. You gotta learn to do this with the hands and the arms. Keep a loose wrist, stay relaxed, you'll be fine. Now, articulation-wise, the left hand, you just connect it as best you can, except for the rest. Just connect these as best you can. Can't connect them, but do the best you can. At the end of the first line in the left hand, you can connect those. That's fine. And the right hand, you lift up between the... Lift up. So lift up between this like a breath. But in the left hand, try and keep it as connected as you can. Speed-wise, well, Largo, it's another Italian word. It means really slow. Really slow. Like very slow. It's like... Indicated pedal. They've got pedaling at the end of the second line, third line, and fourth line. If you're going to pedal, you pedal, push the pedal down right after you play the notes, and you lift the pedal up with the hands. I completely disagree with the pedaling in this piece. I would encourage you not to pedal it at all. The pedaling adds the overtones. And like at the end of the second line, we're coming down. You're coming down to very soft. I don't want to add a bunch of overtones when I'm like that, because the overtones will make it sound a little fuller and louder. That's exactly the opposite what we're after here. So I suggest no pedal on this at all. Again, it gets back to interpretation. What are you going to interpret it like? Generally, since this is an orchestra piece, we would pedal it a lot because we want lots of overtones because we got a full orchestra going. Well, we got to pedal the whole thing if we're going to do that, and they're not doing that with you yet. Now, once you start pedaling the whole piece and they get into pedal, we get in more pedaling and talk about pedaling a little more, you can come back to this piece and try and pedal the whole thing according to the instructions once you've learned how to do that. I'd like to play this with you slowly, probably about the speed it's going to go though. I'm not going to do any dynamics, but we will do the DC al fine thing. So I'll give us 4 counts. Let's just try it together slowly. 1, 2, ready, go. 1 and 2. And 2 and 3 and to the top.